Hey guys, it's Dconnic, and it has definitely been a while. With the ARPG world basically going into slow mode as well as just some real life stuff, I made a decision to, take a little bit of a break from non-stream content. But I am back now, and you can expect more videos from me coming in the lead up to PoE 2, potentially about different things. I'm thinking my plans for EA. In any case, I am happy to be back. And in this one, we're going to be covering the banger of a live stream we had a few days ago with the Path of Exile 2 reveal. I'm going to be giving my general opinion on some of the topics revealed, like Ascendancies and the endgame, and some other topics as well. But without further ado, let's get started.
Quick reminder to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video. The support goes a long way in helping the channel grow, and we are so close to 500 subs.
So starting the PoE live stream, GGG Live, we were greeted with a cinematic in Path of Exile. Now, this is not something I was expecting, and while it wasn't a Blizzard level cinematic, seeing GGG finally attempt a cinematic and make what they did as good as it was, left me hyped for PoE 2 in a way that surprised me, honestly. As while I think Path of Exile lore is actually pretty interesting, I could never personally get into it with the way it was delivered by a sea of text in PoE 1. If anything, it actually made me quit PoE 1 the very first time I tried. Now, while I'm not expecting more cutscenes, it actually reminded me of something GGG said a while back about wanting to give the player a sense of what was happening lore-wise through just like random dialogue that just happened, that your character like says out in the world. And I'm glad to see them at least attempt to fulfill that objective. After this, they went on to talk about classes and ascendancies, and on that front, I was both excited and disappointed. Now, I was excited because of how much ascendancy design philosophy has improved since PoE 1. Ascendancies now feel like they are an even more important choice, and the contrast to what these different ascendancies offer to whatever build you're playing feel a lot more drastic. And then having more build defining ascendancies it makes build creation more interesting. And a notable mention that really caught my attention was the Chronomancer. This ascendancy has the ability to literally stop time for her enemies, rewind time for herself, regaining mana and life she may have lost in that time, or just resetting all her cooldowns. Now, this isn't obviously going to be big for, let's say, builds that don't use many cooldowns, but I can imagine the usefulness that this might have for builds that have one long cooldown, or builds that sacrifice life to do one big cast. Being able to just use the ascendancy to essentially create a playstyle. That kudos to GGG for that one. I really like that. Just by picking that ascendancy, you feel like a god of time versus the second ascendancy the sorceress may have, Now, while we are talking about ascendancies, I have to mention, as a minion enjoyer, I was disappointed at the lack of a witch ascendancy that was focused on the minion, necromancer, as it is in PoE 1. Now, this would not be a problem if there was a different ascendancy that looked like it was catered to minions from what they said, but I think they have gone with the viewpoint that they don't want a de facto ascendancy for any one place, and I understand that, but based on the news that were shown, it doesn't look like we have too many options in the minion community on ascendancies to choose, one of which is the Infernalist. This seems like a de facto minion ascendancy that they made. We've seen 4 nodes, I think, or 3, something like that. Everyone's 4: the Hellhound, the Infernal Flame, the Ignite Infernal Flame for minions and yourself, and then the Transformation. Now, out of these, 2 of them have something to do with minions, which makes me feel, decent. Yeah, they do. They haven't forgotten minions existed, but it doesn't feel like there is much support for minions that do not want to interact with, let's say, fire, because this is a very fire themed ascendancy. Now, there are also other ascendancies in the game that are more viable towards minions, but then there's only one I can think of right now, and that was the Gemlin Legionnaire from the Mercenary. Now, this guy actually has a lot of things that he provides, being things that minion skills would care about in PoE 1. For example, he gives levels to minion skills. He has 3 extra skill gems that he can use, which is very good because, to my understanding, Bind Spectre, each gem can only hold 1 Spectre, so we're going to need multiple gem sockets just to have multiple types of Spectre. So having that 3 extra would be really impactful. So like that levels quality is also a very big one for certain minion skills. And of course, we don't know the details as to the minion skills that have, should I say, that have been revealed, or we don't have too much of a detail. But as we get closer, I hope there will be more revelation as to other ascendancies that we might consider for minion skills. Now, on the note of what I would personally be league starting as a minion enjoyer myself, I am leaning more towards the Infernalist over the Gemlin Legionnaire for one simple reason. I think the Gemlin Legionnaire has potential, but I think starting out, especially in Act 1 and how it's been presented to look in terms of difficulty, I think that not having access to minion nodes and potentially, I guess gems are not an issue, but not having access to those minion nodes would make it a lot more difficult to just start off with minions. So you'd probably have to go a sort of mercenary-esque start until you're able to path to where you would find minion nodes on the intelligence portion of the tree. Now this is obviously jank that would be easier to deal with on your second character, where you have currency to get items to then cushion this region. But starting out, I think I would personally be going for the Infernalist. That is not to say I will not be trying out the Gemini Legionnaire though, so just keep an eye out for when I do try. It just wouldn't be the first thing I try once launch happens. So on the note of Ascension in PoE 2, we're seeing Sanctum and Ultimatum make a comeback as interchangeable trials the Exile can run to ascend, with a third option, according to Jonathan, coming around launch. Maybe could be sooner, who knows. Now, while I'm personally not a fan of Sanctum, anybody who's watched me knows I can't stand it. Every time I've tried, I crashed and burnt. Even if I made Sanctum specific builds, I just could not endure to run it on repeat. But that said, you would be surprised to know that I think Sanctum is honestly going to be my choice for Ascension, for my first character at least. And the reason is, when I think of ascending, I think it should be arduous. I think it is a challenge, something your character does once, overcomes, and then gets stronger for it. And for that little bit of immersion, I think Sanctum, to me, thematically feels better. That said, I love the fact that they do let us choose. And honestly, I mean, like I said, I'll do Sanctum, but for subsequent characters or characters I just want to play, I'm probably just going to pick Ultimatum, because why not? It's more me, it's more ARPG, it's more I just turn my brain off, I select mods I can handle, and I can just deal with my Ascension, much better than Zaro, in my opinion. And the really reason is I don't like lab. I really don't like dealing with lab and how long it is and all of those different things. But that's a me thing again. This is all opinion based. Next up, let's talk about the end game. And this one, they really cooked with it. For a brief summary for those that might not know, the Atlas of Worlds is now an infinitely generated map, and it is littered with zones whose monster level is entirely dictated by the level of waystones you use to open them. Now on this map, or on the Atlas of Worlds rather, there are towers which, once you clear, they can be imbued with tablets, altering all the maps in their area of effect with the mods and league mechanics from said tablets, essentially acting like pseudo scarabs, allowing you to really juice maps that fall within the AoE of multiple towers. And these towers, from the live stream, they can really like cluster up. I think I saw one area that had like literally seven towers, all could have their own different tablets. You could use this to layer the same mechanic or separate. Either way, I'm looking forward to the dynamic feeling it will give the end game, as now you would run different maps, or I guess I should say you are forced to run different maps, and there are a lot more decisions in like the direction of the Atlas of Worlds that you would be pathing towards, and what mechanics you might want to engage with, and what tower clusters you're heading to. And in general, the current Atlas progression system should be a lot more new player friendly, as the need to respec is a lot lower, since each mechanic has its own separate points other than, of course, the base tree. Now, I'm not entirely sure what I feel about the Atlas system. Since on paper, what this means is you might have to run some maps when you're trying to get to a tower where this map just has less juice, or some maps might have insane juice as well. So we'll have to see how it feels having a probably wide variance in the amount of loot dropping depending on like how much juice is really affecting the maps. Because if I were to visualize this in PoE 1 terms, I'd be thinking, so some maps I would have 6 scarabs, which is insane. Right now we can only use 5 scarabs, so like having some maps apply 6-7 scarabs, while other maps have only 1. Like you can imagine just how much difference in loot there would be in those two, between those two scenarios. I'm also not 100% sure how I feel about maps and the fact that they are lost on death. We no longer have 6 portals as your main layer of defense in softcore. Now you die, it's done. You can't progress through that node. You have to find a way around it. Now, in regards to how this would interact with players attempting new bosses that they haven't faced, or I don't know how that would, what kind of behavior that would promote. Because in my head, I see people then running maybe lower tier maps. If you could run a T16 before you run like a T11 when it comes to map bosses, just because you don't want to risk dying once and having to forfeiting the boss essentially. Or alternatively, it might promote a playstyle where you wait until your build trivializes bosses entirely, then you go back and attempt all the boss nodes you skipped and all of these things and whatnot. And I think that runs counter to the vision they had for how bosses should be engaged with, and how each boss, learning mechanics you should expect to die a few times and all of those things. And the fact that you can't run them repeatedly also means that it would take a bit longer to learn said mechanics and all of these things. So we'll have to see how it feels at launch, but it's one of those things where I really hope at least boss portals or Pinnacle boss fights and all of those like really hard fights do not only come with one portal. But other than that, I'm really looking forward to all the things the endgame has to offer, and I can't wait to get my hands on PoE 2 on the 6th of December. Next, we're going to talk a bit about the crafting systems. Now, my first impression after seeing the new crafting system was bye-bye spam crafting. Boy, can I tell you how tired of alteration spamming shit I am after this last Settlers of Cowgirl League. Holy. It is not fun. So I can't even begin to express how amazing it is that I would not have to do anything similar in PoE 2. But it will create an interesting contrast when I have to go back to PoE 1 and I do now have to do it. That's a story for another day. Anyways, the currency items and omens look new player friendly enough to, from the moment you get them, to where newer players would be incentivized to at least attempt them. And I think from what Jonathan said, they should be dropping in quantities where new players should not be afraid to use them on, like, the way it works with scarcity in PoE 1, where you barely drop anything. So when you do drop it, you're just holding on to it for dear life so you can buy something with it. So we'll have to see how it goes. I'm really looking forward to it. I have nothing negative to say about it. It looks good on paper. Let's see how it is. So I was going to mention a video I saw from Empyrean a few days ago, which was about the crafting bench and what his current iteration was when he play tested it. But according to a recent interview with Gazi and Gazi, DM, and Jonathan, it doesn't look like that is still in the game. That is not how the crafting bench functions. And I was going to talk about it, but seeing as that is not the case, there's no need. We currently do not know how the crafting bench is going to function, or if there's even going to be a crafting bench. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see, basically. Next up, we have the Pinnacle boss system. Now, for this system, for those that don't know, the way Pinnacle bosses interact with the Atlas system is, for every league mechanic you may be doing, it has a Pinnacle boss fight. And by beating the boss fights, for your first time beating it in the different difficulties, you'd be getting points to level up set trees. So you would then be able to get more juice out of, let's say, your expeditions or your breaches, so on and so forth. And every single time you allocated a small node, that would increase the difficulty of the main boss fight to where he has more mechanics and he has more life. Now this I really like on paper. I really like the fact that the way they increase the difficulties by making the fight genuinely harder, by giving us either more mechanics to have to deal with, or instead of just number, like health number go up, damage reduction, or one of the other ways they could have just made it harder to kill it. I appreciate the approach they took. Now, another thing is, I think it's a safe assumption. They haven't confirmed this for every single one, but I think it's a safe assumption to say that every single one's keys are going to be dropped within the league mechanic that they are from. So breach, it's from splinters, you get the breach stone, and you go on. But one thing I haven't seen answered anywhere with the ball system is if you were to allocate 2 small nodes after getting, let's say you beat difficulty 1, you get 2 points, and you use those 2 points for 2 small nodes, increasing the difficulty twice. Do you have let me structure it. Do you have 4 points after beating that fight in difficulty 3, or do you still have to downgrade to go to difficulty 2? I ask this because if you full sent one mechanic, you didn't interact with, like, say, breach all through while you were developing your character, and your character is very strong, you might not want to have to do all the difficulties when you just one shot, let's say difficulty 2 or 3. You have that kind of build. So I'm very curious to see what their answer is, and if you do know the answer to this question, please let me know down below. If you've seen it anywhere or whatever, let me know. Overall, I'm really looking forward to trying out what GGG have cooked up with PoE 2, and even if the new mapping system has its quirks, I'm sure most of it will be ironed out with player feedback over the early access, so that it feels as good to engage with it on your first hour as it does on your 10,000th hour for those of us degenerates that will get to the 10,000th hour. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the early access stream, and if there is something you were really hoping they would add sooner rather than later. And if you made it this far, please consider liking and subscribing so you don't miss out on future videos, one of which will probably be a minion build for PoE 2 that I will release after launch when I feel satisfied with where it's at. So definitely look forward to it. And with all that said, thank you for watching.